Sitting in her bed, Ruby Rose had just learned from her Uncle Crow the shocking things her silver eyes could do to Grimm when a news report on the TV from Lisa Lavender caught her attention.
21-year-old Cinder Fall, whose brutal disappearance as a young girl once shook the nation of Atlas, still continues to evade authorities along with her accomplices Mercury Black and Emerald Sustrai. She appeared to be seen on camera taking the life of the beloved Pyrrha Nikos.
Brutal disappearance as a young girl. Did something awful happen to Cinder as a kid or as a teen? Ruby wondered. Tears threatened to fall at the memory of what happened to Pyrrha in the Palace of Vale. Images of Cinder appeared on screen, her arm of Grimm on full display. Lisa continued on.
The young woman who entered Vale's princess trial this year alongside Nikos and many other young huntresses and huntresses in training remains the primary suspect in the attack on Vale's palace, bringing the celebrated competition to a tragic end. Adam Taurus is also wanted for his role in the attack.
The princess trial was a televised competition held only in Vale. Women from around the world, but mostly from Vale, auditioned to become the next princess of Vale and marry the prince, who had been masked for the first 18 years of his life to protect his identity. In years where the heir to the throne was female, it was called the prince trial, even though there had been occasions where a same-sex mate was chosen. Although princess candidates were judged on a variety of factors such as popularity with the audience and the feelings of the heir, semblance and skills as a fighter seemed to be what mattered most. There seemed to be a goal of keeping powerful royal bloodlines in the palace. The princess wasn't the only person being chosen in the trials. Huntresses were also chosen to serve as the guards of the winning princess. Even when a contestant was eliminated, they remained in the palace until the competition was over. Contestants had different motives for entering this competition. Some were in it for the romance. Some were in it for the lien. Some were in it for the fame. Ruby was a second-year Beacon student who had entered the competition so she could be chosen as one of the huntresses to guard the princess, following in the footsteps of her maternal grandmother Cassandra Rose. She didn't have any romantic feelings for the prince. She saw him only as a good friend. Ruby's sister and teammate Yang Xiaolong, who was only a few months older than her, had entered to be chosen as a huntress to guard Blake Belladonna, her girlfriend. Ruby's friend and teammate Blake was the only faunus in the competition, and had entered to serve as positive representation for the faunus. But now it was ruined.
Queen Karen Kuro and Prince Chad Kuro of Mistral have called for former princess candidate Cinder Fall to be put in the hunt, and so far have the necessary number of votes to do so. It marks the first time in the history of the hunt that a human will be executed in the show. Because Fall was born in Mistral, she will be deported to Mistral for the hunt when found.
Uncle Crow, what is the hunt? The 18-year-old asked. A harsh, sadistic reality of the world that your parents worked very hard to shield you and your sister from, making sure you couldn't watch it on television, Crow Branwen replied in his gravelly voice. He took a sip from his ever-present flask before continuing. The hunt is a hell Mistral usually reserves only for faunus, an execution show for killing off faunus criminals. It's hosted by a person labeled the God, and the host changes every 3 years. Mistral Coliseum is made partially of blood dust. You know what that means, don't you? Ruby had heard of blood dust before. It means nobody can use semblances inside of the Coliseum. Semblances or magic, according to Oz, Crow answered. Crow had explained to Ruby that there was magic in this world around the same time he explained to her what her silver eyes had done, the fact that there were relics hidden throughout Remnant, and who was really behind the attack on the palace. Salem. It was a lot to take in, but Ruby guessed she shouldn't be surprised that blood dust worked on magic the same way it worked on semblances. Several faunus criminals are hunted down on camera in a wooded area inside the Coliseum. They're called game. Then one faunus criminal, usually chosen because they're controversial, attractive, or both, is chosen to be the villain. The villain is the main spectacle of the event, held captive in a cage for public viewing until all of the game has been hunted. The villain is judged for their actions, given an exit interview, and then violently killed, usually with their faunus features cut off first. That's wrong, Ruby said, feeling a mixture of disgust and anger. You're right, Crow agreed. And since something as innocent as dating a human is a crime punishable by death for faunus in Mistral, clearly not all of the faunus executed in the hunt are bad people. Ruby thought of Yang and Blake, and felt saddened that there was a place where their love was illegal. Maybe that was part of the reason why their relationship had been a secret, until they were outed a few days ago. Even if a person is bad, they don't deserve to be put in something like the hunt, said Ruby. That's true, Crow agreed. Over the past several years, the hosts of the hunt have been trying to one-up their predecessors with the villain, both in the kind of villains they choose and in the ways that they're killed. A while back the villain was a young male faunus who had supposedly harassed and assaulted a human female. Every bone in his body was broken. After his death it came out that the human woman lied. She faced no punishment. Then in last year's hunt, there was a dog woman faunus who was stabbed to death over 200 times for supposedly falsely accusing a human male producer of abusing her. Her execution got an animated film adaptation. Just this year it came out that the producer had abused other women and girls too, and new evidence came out that he did, in fact, abuse the faunus who was executed. In recent years the hunt has also started to get backlash for only offering up faunus criminals to suffer and die for people's entertainment. Offering Cinder, a young human woman, up to suffer and die for entertainment may be a way to silence those pesky discrimination allegations and serve up shock value at the same time. A fresh wave of horror washed over Ruby as she thought of Cinder, the upperclassman she had spent a year pining for and whom she and her friends had gotten closer to, being made to suffer such a fate. Then Ruby's mind suddenly went to Grandma Cassandra. It was Grandma Cassandra's last vision. It had happened 6 years ago, shortly after Ruby's mom, Summer Rose, had mysteriously died and shortly before Grandma Cassandra herself had died. Her semblance had been the ability to get random premonitions. One day Ruby had been bringing Grandma her tea when she saw her aura shimmering, and knew instantly what it meant. "What did you see?" 12-year-old Ruby had asked, once the shimmering had stopped. "Years from now, a troubled young woman from Mistral will be brutally executed for crimes she did not commit," Grandma Cassandra stated. Her silver eyes locked suddenly on Ruby as she said, "But you can save her. You and your friends." Ruby's dad Ty then came in to give Grandma her meds, so Ruby didn't get the chance to ask her more about the vision. As Grandma Cassandra had gotten older, her visions had become less accurate, especially after her daughter Summer Rose died. But this one had stayed with Ruby. Could Cinder be the young woman in her grandmother's last vision? Cinder, who had held Ruby so tenderly on the night when she'd saved her life, making her promise not to reveal the fact that she could fly. Ruby had taken a stupid risk one night at Vale Palace, standing on the ledge of a balcony in a long, frilly red ball gown one night for the thrill and accidentally tripping. Ruby could have and would have used her semblance to save herself, but Cinder had happened to be watching her out the window and flew to where she was and caught her. Cinder hadn't given an explanation for why she was able to fly when her semblance was something very different. Ruby later learned it was the power of the Fall Maiden that had enabled Cinder to fly. Lately it seemed like there was a lot that Ruby hadn't known about the girl she had been crushing on. Was Cinder the killing machine she was being made out to be? Her heart said no, but Ruby knew that it wasn't only her feelings for Cinder telling her that she was innocent. When she had seen what had appeared to be Cinder killing Pyrrha in front of her, something had happened that made her question whether it was actually Cinder who she was seeing. But was it enough to save her from the hunt? "Don't worry about the hunt right now," Crow said. "Right now, all you need to know is that the enemy's next target seems to be Mistral, the relic hidden at Haven Academy. Uncle Crow, is Yang here?" Yang lost her arm during the battle. "She's in her room right now." Concerned, Ruby instantly went to her sister. The mysterious woman was on her scroll, about to update her leader when she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. Yang Xiaolong passionately making out with Blake Belladonna in the royal garden. The mysterious woman quickly snapped a picture and left the area with a smirk on her face. Although neither Belladonna nor Xiaolong were the targets for her mission at the princess trial, this photo would be useful for another part of her mission and make for good drama, and she loved leaving chaos in her wake. Wait until Adam Taurus sees this, the mysterious woman thought. Later that day everyone knew that two of the princess candidates were seeing each other, The photo was all over the internet, and it was leaked from the Chirper account of Weiss. The photo was captioned with the comment, "Yang is a beast banger and Blake is a rabid slut." The account of Carden Winchester, an obnoxious Beacon classmate of theirs, liked and re-chirped that comment. Some people were shocked or even disgusted that a human was dating a faunus. Although relationships between humans and faunus had been legalized in Vale right after the Great War, people from Vale weren't the only people who watched and commented on the princess trial. Some, in particular those with ties to the anti-faunus hate group, Humanity First, said Yang was degrading herself by being with a faunus, asking what she was teaching her sister RWBY, while others said that Blake was just proving how loose and unfit for royal status the faunus were. Others didn't care about race but were scandalized by the fact that two princess candidates were dating each other when they were supposed to be there for the prince. A religious leader from Children of Light, one of Remnant's few remaining religion, wrote an essay on how the fact that two girls were dating was evidence of moral decline in the princess trials. Blake's, Yang's, and RWBY's approval ratings in the trial went down, with calls for all three girls to be eliminated. Other people supported Yang and Blake, and were more put off by the bigotry on display by Weiss, who was the second most popular princess candidate after Pyrrha Nikos. Weiss was being called the mean girl of the princess trial. Yang would not let the hate get to her. She loved Blake, was not ashamed of their love, and was tired of having to sneak around with her as if the Great War hadn't happened 80 years ago, or as if they lived in Mistral, or even as if they lived in Atlas, a kingdom that had only legalized human and faunus relationships 5 years ago. The only reason why she'd agreed to keep their relationship a secret in the first place was because Blake was worried about them being targeted. "You guys, I swear I didn't do this. Somebody must have somehow gotten access to my account. You believe me, don't you?" Weiss asked. "I believe you," Yang said confidently. "We know you're not like that." There was a silence, and both Yang and Weiss looked at Blake. Yang got worried. She remembered that Weiss and Blake's relationship had gotten off to a rocky start, and hoped this situation wouldn't undo their progress. Blake stared at Weiss for a long moment and then finally spoke. "I don't think you would do something like this. A while ago someone close to me changed, so this is hard for me. But you're not him. I believe you." Unfortunately, the power of friendship wasn't enough to keep the audience from voting RWBY, Yang, and Blake out of the princess trial. But the prince used his one save to keep Blake from being eliminated because he wanted to take a stand against all the hate. Like all of the other eliminated princess candidates, RWBY and Yang would remain at the palace until the princess was chosen. The 5 remaining princess candidates were Pyrrha, Weiss, Penny Polandina, Blake, and Cinder. The next day Weiss was walking through the hallway when she saw Prince John on a balcony with Pyrrha. His mask was off. The two stood very close, and Pyrrha had a look of intense emotion in her green eyes. Weiss peeked at them and listened to them from behind a pillar so she wouldn't be seen. "I need to know. Who do you love?" Pyrrha asked. Weiss felt her heart racing in anticipation. "The truth is, I think I'm in love with both you and one other person here," John answered quietly. "But the woman I've chosen to marry, to be the princess, is you, Pyrrha." Then they kissed. Weiss felt her heart sink. She supposed she shouldn't be too surprised. Pyrrha was amazing, Weiss even admired her. She was her favorite celebrity, and yet she was so down to Remnant. Kind, beautiful, a great warrior. She was everything a huntress and a modern princess should be. Even at Beacon, John and Pyrrha both had seemed to have feelings for each other. But John had seemed to have feelings for Weiss too, and Weiss knew she had feelings for him. John was the younger brother of Queen Saffron Arc, and Weiss was the second daughter of Queen Willow Schnee of Atlas. Her older sister, Winter, had been stripped of her title 4 years ago. Both Vale and Atlas shared the custom of keeping young royals masked and unknown to the public, their names and faces hidden until after they turn 18 and get engaged. It was because of this practice that they were even able to attend Beacon unmasked as if they were regular civilians. Weiss enrolling both in the school and the princess trial as Weiss Solstice, and John attending the school as John Archer. Weiss had actually met John when they were both 14. Weiss and her family had been invited to Vale Palace. Somehow both she and John had ended up ditching their guards and the mask had slipped off of her face. Frustrated, young Princess Weiss had insisted. Since you've seen my face, I get to see yours too. Young Prince John had complied, taking off his mask and smiling warmly at her. She was stricken by how handsome he was, and they'd both stood there blushing at each other. Years later, when they saw each other again at Beacon Academy, John had been a little cold toward her at first. Weiss had an idea of why that was. Shortly after she had turned 14, negative false rumors had suddenly started to follow her. Rumors that she was a terrible bitch with a personality disorder. At 15, she had even been falsely accused of homewrecking. When she was younger, she used to obsessively lash out against the rumors online through fake accounts. But by the time she was 17 and at Beacon, she decided to refute the hurtful rumors just by being herself, proving them wrong. Throughout the year, John had seemed to warm up to Weiss. One day, Weiss had playfully told John in private, "I've heard that the Princess of Atlas is entering the Princess trial. Hopefully the Prince of Vale doesn't find the idea of the Prince X the Princess to be too cliché." John had grinned at her and said, "It's not cliché, it's a classic." As Weiss had gotten closer to her friends, she'd eventually revealed to her team exactly who she was, trusting them with her secret. That trust had spread to the rest of Team JNPR as well, and John had likewise revealed his identity to the rest of Team RWBY. But John would always be the first person outside of family who had seen Weiss without her mask. As Weiss watched John kiss Pyrrha, she couldn't help but wish it was her. He'd said he was in love with one other person. Could it be her? Did it matter at this point? Weiss had entered the princess trial for 2 reasons: to bring back honor to the royal Schnee family name, and most importantly, to marry the guy she'd had feelings for since she was 14 years old. But it looked like it hadn't worked out that way. Weiss let her mind go to the conversation she'd had with John after that photo of Blake and Young had been leaked, how she'd sworn she was innocent. She'd thought John had been upset over the situation but not with her. Had she misinterpreted that? As Weiss felt the tears come to her eyes, she thought, did John choose Pyrrha over me because of the photo scandal? Does he really think I would do something like that to my friends, or to anybody? Has he believed the rumors about me being a terrible person this whole time?